Resident Evil 9's going open world. Now, we knew a bit of this anyway. We did a video back in March talking about this. There's a little bit more details come out about it. But yeah, Resident Evil 9 apparently going open world and will be revealed soon. There's more detail come out about this game from known leaker Dusk Golem, who I feel like is a veteran of the leaker game at this point.
Yeah, definitely.
For as long as we've been doing leaks, or covering leaks, which is like 6-7 years at this point, Dusk Golem always been there.
Well, what I love about this leak is that it refers to an older Dusk Golem leak that they made about, and we'll get to it, but the setting of the game.
The Dusk Golem shared universe.
Yeah.
He can't get enough. Aesthetic Gamers in there. He loves it.
The DGU, I love it. But yeah, it sort of links back to that. But I guess without repeating too much from our previous video, I know this is controversial. I'm here for Resident Evil going open world. Yeah. I think they're practically there anyway. And I need to clarify this because I think to a lot of people, myself included, when they hear the word open world, they think Assassin's Creed. They think Just Cause. They think like these huge sandboxes. And that's not what I mean. When I think open world, I'm thinking something more akin to Arkham City. An open area, but one that is smaller than a Grand Theft Auto map, but one that is densely detailed and is recursive on itself.
Right, okay. I'm curious about the lessons they learned from... I'll get back to the details as well. There's more about RE9, but I'm curious in regards to how you make a bigger map and make it feel dense and curated and worthwhile, because I'd love... There was a certain groove that RE Village kind of hit about halfway through where you were clearing different parts of the map and you were using different items to go back and forth. RE2 Remake had a bit of it as well, where they would tell you on the map screen, hey, there's something else in this area that you haven't seen, go back and find it. And I thought Village had a really good groove after, once you got out of the initial area, going up against Lady D and everything. And yeah, I'm just curious, like, if they're going to do an open world Resident Evil, does it still feel like one big curated map? Do they have big long stretches where you're taking a vehicle from place to place or whatever? Dusk Golem's updated details say that the game will be set in a fictional rural town on an island in the Southeast Asia Sea, specifically inspired by Singapore. Interestingly, it's been in development for 7 years, which predates RE Village, and kind of like brings about a whole conversation on were they thinking about this years ago. Village is almost more of a proof of concept, or might be retrospectively when we see where they do next. And apparently it's going to be announced soon. The release date is penciled in as January next year.
Oh, yes.
So it's not too much longer to wait. I feel like that's still continuing the Capcom cadence that they've settled into. We had RE4 Remake, RE Village. Like, there's been Resident Evil stuff pretty consistently, and you might as well top that off with RE9.
Oi, man. Oi. Call me Churchill because, oh, yes, I'll say it again. I need more Resident Evil in my life.
Very good.
And I thank you.
I thought you meant the warmonger.
Thank you for
mean
that.
the other fellow?
No, I mean the little doggy.
Yeah,
the little advert.
The other Churchill.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Look it up on YouTube if you...
I said warmonger. I don't know what his title was. Churchill, the war man.
He was a prime minister, wasn't he?
The warman. That's the one.
Let's go with that.
Probably didn't monger that much of his stuff.
Who knows?
What are you
We'll
going to
do some history afterwards.
If this leaves in the edit, then enjoy yourself.
He wasn't a dog, is all we know.
That's right.
You know, which is who I was referring to.
Yes.
What was I talking about, Scott Tailford?
Churchill.
Churchill. When it comes to Resident Evil and the cadence, like you said, of Capcom having a yearly release, next year, to me, that seems perfect. It's 5 years, which is crazy after Village.
Good God.
And if it has been in development for 6 or 7 years, like these leaks suggest, and the previous leaks seem to suggest as well, because if I'm getting those right, I think the last time Dusk Golem talked about this project in particular, I'm trying to remember information that's a few years old now, but I'm pretty sure the original idea was that Village was going to be a spin-off, but then the quality was there for it that Capcom decided, oh no, we'll make this a numbered release. We'll continue the story of Ethan Winters as an official numbered game. So that makes me excited about what's coming next, because the ending of Village, while there were a few teasers about what could happen after that story was done, it felt like they'd sort of wrapped up that narrative, I thought, with the end of that game. So what are we going to get this time around? Are we going to get any characters related to that storyline? Are we going to get a brand new character with a brand new setting? Or will we see the return of old faces like Leon or Claire or Jill or whoever it is? What
if it's a custom character and because the thing is, like, one thing that I thought they did really well in Village was differentiating the different areas of the overall map. Like the Beneviento house is like one of the scariest locations Resident Evil has ever done, tapping into like the PT New Age Silent Hill vibe, and that was like, very much distinguished from the castle where Lady D and the vampires were. And I like the idea of blowing that out and having different feels to different areas in a bigger map. So that just made me think, what if you're a custom character, or you're, because Ethan Winters,
Yes.
Yes, Ethan Page is a wrestler. Ethan Winters might as well be a blank slate custom protagonist. Like, there's not that much to him. And so I just wonder, like, if you're going to explore this big area and you have all these different differentiable parts of it, then maybe you have characters that are already tackling some big, whatever the enemy force is.
Yeah.
And you're checking in. You're partnering up with Chris for a bit. You're partnering up with Jill for a bit. And you're going between these different areas.
See, I get the appeal of it, right? I really do. And you're 100% right. Ethan, especially in 7, was supposed to be as much of a blank slate as possible for the new first-person perspective to allow you to really put yourself into his shoes and his arms, which are always coming off. But I thought with Village, they managed to round him out a bit more. Like, they gave him way more of a sense of character and way more of an impact on the actual story itself. You know, him and Mia, and just giving him that combat training that Chris gave him between games, I thought did a lot to make him feel like someone who was more capable or whatever. Yeah. I worry that with a custom character, if it's completely a blank slate, that you lose a bit of the horror. Like, for me, in survival horror games, often so much of it is tied around the protagonist, less so in Resident Evil, but you still have that mythology around someone like Leon or Claire or Chris, like I said. But, you take something like The Evil Within 2, and that lead character in that game, he was kind of nothing in the first title, but in the second game, suddenly he's got all this baggage, he's got this family, what's going on is almost a manifestation of his own biggest fears or whatever. It's directly linked to him. So I worry you'd sort of lose that interiority if you go completely custom. However, I would like an element of customization over your protagonist, but I would like them to have some kind of rigid story, whether that's flexible or not. Fair enough.
Speaking of story, where are you on expectations of a main thread in Resident Evil? Like, for the people who have been following Resident Evil since the beginning, like, we've seen things like in RE4, you had Los Ganados, and then in RE5, it was like we went to Africa. There was like the whole origin of the various viruses, the different plants and everything. RE6 is the one that I didn't finish. I know that RE6 is obviously very contentious in itself, but and then RE7 kind of got away from that. It was almost like a soft reboot. You had like the different sort of like parasitic stuff with the Baker family. And then Village had werewolves and everything else. And it kind of just, it does eventually tie back around to like, the original like characters like Spencer or whatever else. Yeah. At the very end of Village, or was like the founder of Umbrella and everything. And so I'm just curious, like, do people, for a numbered Resident Evil installment, are there people hanging on to the lore, wanting the next main chapter of that main thread? What are the characters up to, etc.? Yeah. Or because of how successful 7 was in sort of differentiating itself, and like I said, all the Ethan Winter stuff, you call it RE9, but it's open world and it has very little to do with that initial thread of trying to pick apart what the secrets of Umbrella were.
You're right at the center of what I'm going to dub right now the Resident Evil Conundrum, right? Because everyone wants something different from Resident Evil. Like, every fan, no matter how diehard you are, probably want something else from what Resident Evil 9 is going to be. To me, I always like the reinvention of it. I know 4 still stars Leon, but like that story is practically completely different. Like the links to the previous games are so small, and it felt like a fresh start. Same with 7, like the Umbrella stuff and the biohazard stuff itself only really comes in right towards the end. Otherwise, it feels entirely different. So I like the idea of constantly doing something new. And in their current form, I've kind of come to not doubt Capcom anymore. I probably should still be a little bit skeptical, but when it was first announced that Resident Evil 8 was going to star werewolves, everyone was like, what? I don't want any werewolves. Like, that's going to be strange. It's going to be fairy tale based. What the hell is that about? But then for me, they pulled that off really well and managed to make it feel like a Resident Evil game. So going forward, if they want to take more risks like that, I'm fine with it. And I'll tell you why I'm fine with it.
Please do.
Because we're never going to lose spin-offs and remakes. Like you said, they've committed to a Resident Evil every single year. So we're always going to get those classic characters in some form, whether it's redoing them or whether it's continuing their stories in spin-offs like Revelations or whatever it is. We're going to always see zombies. We're always going to see the Ganados in some form. So I like this era where the main franchise can evolve and change and take risks, because we've always got that bedrock of classic Resident Evil, as it were, paraphernalia.
That's the thing that I'm so curious if they remake RE5 and then do 6. Like, there are lots of salvageable elements to both those games, especially things like 6. Like, I like the combat model that Leon has in RE6. Yeah. But I think there's things that you can do with remixing the original games to get them in a more like unified timeline. Like, so far, the remix of RE, like obviously one from a good few years ago, but RE2, 3, and 4 are like the whole, like a new canon, like where it's way more crystallized, it makes way more sense. They're not improvising as much as they were back in the day. Retrospectively, they can kind of knit it together. Some of the response to like this stuff leaking out is a bit more of a groan these days than things used to be. And I wonder whether just the idea of, hey, it's going open world is just more of like a sour thing in 2024.
100%. I mean, you look at the comments, rightly so. I get the skepticism on our last video. You look at the Reddit threads and stuff, and a lot of people, like you said, are kind of groaning and going, I don't know if I necessarily want this. I don't think this is a good move for the franchise. To me, it does make sense because they are almost there. Like those old games could be small open world games, in my opinion. Like something like the Island in Code Veronica, or the Spencer Mansion in 1, or Raccoon City in 2 and 3. And especially Village, you're so close to it anyway.
Yeah.
Like, it's way more authored, but I think an open world that is more authored is fine anyway. That can lead you down certain paths and might lock off certain areas until later on. Like, when I say open world in Resident Evil, I don't view it as a sandbox. I don't view it as go wherever, tackle the story in a non-linear fashion. I think of it still scripted and still focused and still authored, just by knocking down the boundaries that are there in the level design and just really opening up.
Yeah, we'll just have to see what they do. I don't know. Resident Evil feels like this big omnipresent franchise at this point, and I will take various different slices of it. We said it in the previous video, or we talked about it, but I want third person. If you're giving me vehicles, I want it to be a bit closer to something like Metal Gear Solid 5. Just give me a little Jeep, whatever it is, and I'll bomb around from location to location, maybe across a dilapidated Raccoon City or whatever it is, taking in authored chunks in between.
I don't know about you, but that was always my dream for Resident Evil 3's remake. Give me a Raccoon City that's at least semi-open. I want to live in that space because that would be such a cool idea, I think. And that's kind of what I want to see them do this time around. Give us a space that we can explore and hide scares in there. The Evil Within 2 showed us how surprising horror can be if you give us control of not only our character, but where we go in the environment, because there's always something unknown lurking around a corner, and it doesn't feel as scripted as, you know, a more straightforward linear story, which can still be very scary.